Okay, we'll bring this meeting to order.
I don't know why today.
We can go around the table and introduce ourselves. I'm Linda, I'm chair of the school committee.
Larry White, Raleigh Finance Committee.
Peter Sansillo, Raleigh Finance Committee.
Jeff Walker, Newbury Select Person.
Christine Nealon, Chair, Raleigh Board of Selectmen.
Sherry David, Vice Chair, Raleigh Board of Selectmen.
Leslie Matthews, Newbury Board of Selectmen.
Nurse Llewellyn, School Committee.
Mike Colburn, Salisbury Selectman.
Ryan Forget, Superintendent Drayton.
Richard Keys, Newbury Finance Committee.
Kelly smelling brown.
Brian Perry, Director of Finance and Operations for the Triton.
And last but not least,
Bonnie Mae Parrott, Salisbury.
I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Especially.
And attached to the agenda is the meeting notes from the last meeting. You don't have to vote on it. And then the next item is the general update, which I'll hand to Brian.
So I don't have a long, extensive general update. It's, my
Brian, you
gosh.
say that all the time.
I know. I'm gonna live up to my promise. I love that people know me.
And the rest of this. I'm gonna pass one to Ronnie.
Thank you very much.
It's shockingly already November next week, and so we're already 2 months into the school year. But things continue to go well. I will say, right, it continues to be a challenge. We're still adjusting to, we being students and teachers are adjusting to life post-pandemic. And while I think there are many things that seem to be getting into a normal rhythm, we still do have our challenges just with life reacclimating to a very different world. So, but all the programs, the amazing programs, food services programs, the sports programs, our football team is having a very successful year, as are other sports. But it is a very typical fall. But oh my gosh, the fall is already almost over. So before you know it, we'll be jumping into the next agenda item and talking about the budget again.
Does anybody have any
Say any
questions?
questions about anything that's gone on, people have seen or heard, or?
I have a quick
Sure.
question. What are the new programs that you have introduced that are, you're finding to be successful, other than, you know, the regular norm, school programs as far as sports and academics and things of that nature? Is there something new that, you know, has come onto the horizon?
As far as new programs, I'm assuming you're not meaning curriculum and stuff, you're meaning like opportunities? I don't.
Do you want to talk about music at the elementary schools, because I think that
Oh, that's
also
true.
leads into
Yeah.
John Weston's
So cultural.
being honored.
Yeah, I mean, so athletics, the teams we've had are the teams we have. I mean, we have, as our school, along with many other schools on the North Shore, have shrunk. Participation, when I think especially at the secondary level, participation is challenging when you have a high school of 550 students, a middle school of just under 300 students now. So there are teams that are co-oping where multiple schools are together. And so, so similarly, we've had the discussion about the arts programs over the years, the number of students participating for a variety of reasons, a huge one of those being a lower number of overall students. So we have, over the last year and a half, made some changes to the performing arts starting at the elementary level. So previously, we offered band to students, instrumental lessons during the day. At one point, it was as low as third grade, but it's traditionally been fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. It's fee-based. Parents rent an instrument. Usually by about halfway through the first year, there's a good black market for used instruments out there, right, that we're decided. So over the last couple of years, we've made some shifts and are working to determine when is the right time to shift from it being an elective, or I'm sorry, from it being required to an elective. So right now, it's completely elective. And the structure doesn't always make it easy for a student to choose to take an instrument lesson. They're pulled out of class and then go back and have to make up work. So we're looking at overall structures. We're actually, as a group of us, visiting another district, Wakefield, later, I was gonna say later this month, but it's actually next month. It's early next month. Jenna Demento, who is a Triton grad, is a band teacher there down in Wakefield, and so we're gonna go down and look at their structures. So that making sure that we're providing more opportunities and also having that discussion around what should all students participate in without a choice to gain the exposure that music and the arts provides. So some changes we've already made. All students in fourth grade are having a half a year of chorus, and all students in fifth and sixth grade are participating in chorus. That, depending on the elementary you were at, that might have been your experience, or that might be new. Also, it's still voluntary, but I had reported to you previously there was a donation from John Weston, who was a former Newbury parent. His kids are much older now, and he made a donation last year to make the program free for fourth graders. This year, the partnership with ICL Auto, Damon and Marshall Jesperson matched that donation of $10,000. So there's a $20,000 donation that is making the entire program free for fourth graders. The school committee waived the fee for elementary instrumental. So that now means that for fourth grade, there's no user fee, and every student has an instrument rented for them if they want to participate. Again, it's not required. But that donation from, and they've now committed to this for multiple years, the Westons and the Jespersons and ICL Auto, allows all students to have a free instrument and not have parents making that choice. That is, yes, I definitely want to play the flute, Mom. And by October, I'm pretty sure I wanted the trumpet, and then they're a drummer, and then they're a... So it allows an instrument to be rented free of charge for the full year. They then get to make a choice in fifth grade whether they want to participate. And then at this point, they have to purchase an instrument in order to continue. But the fee is now still waived for fifth and sixth grade. I am working with a group to hopefully also have a donation that would set up an in-house repair shop. The district has about 100 instruments, 120 instruments that are that junior level, that the majority of them need minor repairs. Some of them need major soldering and replacements. But we do have staff in-house that if we can set up a shop, metalsmithing, to be able to make those repairs. We'd be able to also have a loaner program to say to those fifth grade parents, okay, your kiddo tried it out, now they're pretty sure they want a saxophone. We're gonna encourage you to buy a saxophone. It's gonna be a much better experience if you own it. But if you don't, we still can provide you a loaner instrument. So that's the next iteration. I'm hopeful that we would potentially have that in place for next year. And then for the balance of this year, we'll be doing a little more work, surveying families and students and alum to try and get a sense of that delineation of what should be required and what is then voluntary. It has largely been voluntary, and there are challenges currently at the middle school and the high school without an aligned schedule. We're moving towards an aligned schedule that will help solve some of those problems. But when you get into a middle school and a high school and you have electives and other opportunities, there's always going to be competing interests. There's always going to be, I want to take this, but it doesn't fit into my schedule. If you're a larger high school of 1,000 students, we might be offering 4 sections of algebra. We're offering 1 or 2 sections of algebra. So if band lines up with, band and art that you want to take lines up with one of those sections, and you have to take algebra, you don't have an option. So it is one of the challenges of being a smaller school, as we've learned over the years as we continue to shrink. But it is something that we're seeing in Pentucket and Newburyport and Amesbury and all the other surrounding schools as we continue to get smaller. But that is definitely, appreciate you bringing that up. That's a good thing to mention. That's been a work in progress for a while. And there's no new program, but I think it's something that I personally believe it's really important that students have that the arts are a part of their educational experience because it exercises a very different part of the brain.
Most definitely.
Yeah,
For some kids, it's what gets them through high school.
yeah,
My
yeah.
daughter was case, my oldest daughter, who's now 36. She was in the performing arts, and she said, thank God I had performing arts.
It is
Special
a
group.
mind-altering from academics for the students to actually step into something that they really enjoy. And it makes them better learners, my opinion.
I agree.
Well, there's actual research about music and academics and listening to music while you're doing academics, and there's a connection with music and math. So a lot of really good students with math are also really good with music because there's the algorithms of,
It's a measurement.
And the idea of performing, right? The idea of being in front of a crowd and preparing collectively for something, similar to sports, right? I think there's,
Yeah, for those kids that, don't have the ability to play sports, to have some kind of outreach to do something else, to be able to challenge themselves to get up and be a better person, to put themselves into the future and be a better study. That's why I asked the question.
it's a good question. And I will say, when we visited Ipswich, their music strong programs have been incredibly strong for decades, right? It's been a hallmark of the Ipswich Public Schools. When you talk to them, right, so we have students who participate, you're an athlete, or you're a band kid, or you're a theater kid. It was amazing to talk to students there, and they do everything, right? So the student who is first chair, they have orchestra as well, first chair in the violin section for the orchestra is also the captain of the girls lacrosse team. And the boys football coach, not the coach, that would be weird, captain, thank you, is also in the band and plays a lead role in the band, right? So it's those types of things where it's not you're this kid, we all participate. And I think it then takes away the stigma of, I don't want to do chorus because no one's doing it, versus some will love it and some will hate it, but everyone will benefit because of it, so.
Everyone will benefit. The school will benefit.
Exactly.
The kids will benefit.
we had a kid like that 2 years ago, Ashton once.
Yeah, Ashton
He
Watson.
was captain
Oh,
of
yeah.
football team, captain the wrestling team, and he was in the chorus, and I mean, it was amazing how, I loved how diverse he
Yeah.
was, that helped him get a
And it was
better
hard,
college,
right? Just for him, just the
Right.
scheduling of it all.
Right.
It's hard.
Was he Pine Grove? I think he was Pine Grove.
I don't know where he went
He
for
was
middle.
Pine
He was 2 years younger than my son, but he's playing football on a college level now. And, music really, I think, gave him that self-esteem because he had definitely
Yeah.
other issues but he was amazing to do both and he was really good at it.
Brian, I like the idea because, Nathan's 50 and Josh is 47, and they both wrestled and played all kinds of sports, and that was the heyday of Mr. Manso and that whole crew. And, saxophone and trumpet, and they look back to the performing arts almost as fondness of anything. That was a tremendous band crew back then.
I mean, how many?
Oh, yeah, and I think all those alumni would probably help out financially if they were contacted with the new direction you're taking. Because it was great for our kids.
Look at Janet Demento, she's a
Yeah.
success story, she's running camps and
Absolutely.
everything.
Yeah.
Kids.
Marched around with my band parent pin on.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, right, so I think that campus had about, I'd have to go back and look at the number in the year, but 1,200 students, 1,300 students?
You're talking about Narissa and I's.
I mean, literally.
So you know. That was our graduating classes.
Giving away
was the
secrets.
Because Erin would be able to tell you exactly how many people were in the band around that time.
I'm gonna go, there had to be 900 students on campus, I think.
So what year?
My graduating class was 153 in 1995.
About the same.
153?
153?
That's low.
It was my graduating class, yeah.
In 85, my graduating class was 185.
I think we were the dip, and then it got
And then
really,
it got
really
big, yeah.
big in like the early 2000s, yeah.
And I just think what's happening is you have these year-round sports now,
Yeah.
indoor soccer and indoor, and I think
The
that's,
elite sports groups outside of it.
and that's what the arts are competing with.
Yeah, and then so the question becomes, what can we make compulsory during the day, where we're saying for the 7 hours we have students, for 180 days, what are the experiences we want them to have?
Memorable.
And
Memorable.
you never know, we might have one of the most famous Triton kids that ever came out of Triton, with Gavin Maringi.
Yeah.
There's gonna be some upcoming things where he's gonna be going nationally on a huge stage that's gonna be coming out
I
soon.
love it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So he's making a choice, he's being a good kid, cause he's making a man's choice right now of holding back on some things and in the best interest of friends in the school. And one day you guys will find out about it, it's his father and him would speak about it, but he's holding back for the best of the school and his friends.
Love it.
He's becoming a real man, that kid.
Those are the lessons that,
Huh?
those are the lessons that each one of these
Yep.
things teach the kids to become better adults.
Yeah, cause he could be in Nashville or LA right now
Mm.
on a big scale, but he's holding back because, you know, he wants to make sure he has an education and he's a senior year, and as we all know, he plays
Let's
a
make
sport
sure he
that,
has a childhood.
there's a sport that he really needs to play this year for the best interest of Triton, so I'll leave it as that.
Okay. Moving on, the FY '26 budget development.
So nothing, there's no documents, there's no presentation. Just to share with you that we will be reverting back to the process we've used historically. Last year was a year we knew we were gonna have many budget challenges. There was a contract that we settled, it was the first year of, that we knew there'd be first year impacts of that were gonna be extremely challenging. So this year we'll be moving back to the process. I don't have the exact dates in front of me, January 16th, 17th, 18th, that week of the teens in January, that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the school committee meets over 3 nights. Every principal, every department head, if you will, in the domains, presents directly to the school committee the needs that are presenting themselves. So it makes for a longer process, but it's an important process for having a strong public discussion around what the needs are when we talk about what we have, and then also what the needs are of the district in far more detail. That doesn't mean it's affordable, that doesn't mean it's something that we'll be able to do, but I think it's part of the, important part of the process to have that discussion so that people are aware of what the needs are, and then we have an informed discussion from there about what the realities are that each of the towns are dealing with. Because I don't imagine any town is looking at your forecast and thinking, hey, we have a huge influx of money coming down the pipe. It's just not the reality. So,
MCAS versus there's pros and cons, you know where that's gonna go?
Are you talking about the
Oh,
ballot
yeah.
question?
Yeah.
question 2.
Yeah,
So question 2 does not change the MCAS, right? MCAS is taken grades 2 through 8, and then in grade 10, I'm sorry, 3
I was just
through.
gonna say, when did it go to second? Wait a minute.
All of our preschoolers
second
are
grade.
now
We're
taking
taking
MCAS. No. So I'm sorry, so it's grades 3 through 8, and then it's a competency determination for graduation. So students take the tests in grade 10. They then have 2 more chances in their sophomore year and junior year and senior year to pass if they need to on retakes. All that's being removed from question 2 is the competency determination connection. So you don't have to pass the test in order to graduate. So,
A lot of people are very confused on that, because I'm getting a lot of DMs.
yeah.
People ask me,
Yeah.
is MCAS going away? How, what do we, I have to
Yeah.
explain it to them.
Yeah, so as Brian, this is Brian speaking on behalf of anyone, I'm not a fan of the MCAS, right? It is not a test,
you.
it does not test the things that we need our students to have and be able to do in the world we're living in.
stifles creativity too.
Yeah, right, so there are so many students who are far more capable than their testing capacity,
Not good test
sitting on
takers,
not a good test taker on a computer. So all that aside, I'm not a fan of question 2 because it disconnects the only measure we have right now as a statewide graduation standard. So I think the only other things that, right, there's a PE requirement and there's one other random one, right? But there is no statewide competency determination for graduation. We would be one of a very few states that would literally have, I think 44 of the states have a test. So if we were talking about performance-based assessments and real competency determinations, game on, let's talk about that importance. Question two doesn't do that, it just disconnects. You then have a test that we have to have all students in grade 2 through, they did it again, 3 through 8 in grade 10 take, none of that changes, and there is then no teeth to it. So it's what we all get measured by, the Boston Globe loves to rank us by, but then all the students are being told very clearly, it's really not that big a deal, it's just a report that your parents get, and, you know, the school's gonna be
That's what I
ranked.
tell my students.
Yeah, is it right? Yeah, but at
Not a
least
big
there's
deal,
a,
you're
you
in
gotta
third
pass.
grade,
Yeah.
who cares?
So,
Practice,
yeah.
it's practice.
So I think the reality is it's not, I like the intent of it, the execution is not wise in my mind. It's putting the cart before the horse.
And I'm a little lost, when you say to actually graduate, has there actually been students that have spent their, you know, have attended every class and gone through all the
Yeah.
designated grades? And
Yeah, the number is
didn't
like-
pass that test?
It's like a half to 1%, a half to 1% across the state that can't pass the test.
Now, what happens to them at that point?
So they can have another, it's called a competency determination, they can't get a diploma. Largely, those are English learners and students with disabilities that can't get across that final hurdle. So again, when you start to create that argument, I say, yeah, game on, let's change that. Cause there has to be a way to measure their competency so that they're gonna go out, depending on what they're planning to do next. So, yeah.
Somebody could have like dyslexia, and they could have problems with that.
Somebody could have
It's not good.
anxiety
Yeah.
and
Yes.
excess anxiety and not do well, that's what I see is anxious kids can't
Yeah.
test.
Have an IQ of
Anxiety is a
150.
real thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they could be really lopsided on one side, you know, towards math or
They could be,
English or, you know.
they could be brilliant and then they
Sure.
sit down and take a test and freak out and don't pass it.
Yeah, you can put them in front of a group, ask them about their competence and watch them and you think, oh my gosh, these people need to rule the world. But put them in front of a test and a computer,
It's similar to white coat anxiety,
Yeah.
you know, just, am I gonna come out of this okay? And you start to doubt yourself, and that's the last thing you want to instill onto a student.
yeah. So I think there's a big change needed in the way we're educating, right? And it's hard to do that when the standards by which we're measured aren't measuring the things we really wanna talk about. So, you know, our career counselor at the high school has done so much incredible work of putting career opportunities and choices, and there are students who know, the families know they're not bound for college, and that's okay. And so let's do what we can to make sure they're successful and have the skills so they can go out in the world and be successful, even without a college degree. So, and if that's what the family wants and the student supports, then game on, let's do everything we can to get that student into the best institution they can get into. We're doing a lot of work around the portrait of a learner, and the goal is to have that kind of portrait by the end of the year. We met Tuesday for the full day. We had some students involved, and they were talking about how much pressure there is. All you think about in high school is your GPA, because you want to go to a good school and you know your family can't afford 79 Northeastern is $90,000 a year. So you know the only way
Beginning of
you're-
it, I just went through it. That's the
Right,
beginning.
right, so you know the only way you can afford it is if you're getting a lot of academic scholarships. And if you're kind of the typical student in a rural school, man, you've got to stand out some way. And that means you're at the top 5 of your class. And so these kids are just literally killing themselves, mentally and physically, trying to get across that finish line, and that's not the standard we want, right? It has become skewed, and so I think we need an entire revamp and rethink of what we do in education and how we prepare our students, and the MCAS doesn't measure that.
And the other side of that, what I see is private schools are getting bigger and bigger because parents are getting sick and tired of the way the public schools are having to teach. And they want something different, and it's crazy to me how many kids are going to private schools, insane. I never thought I would see some of these private schools get as big as they've gotten. I mean, Covenant Christian is right next to me, started off just this tiny little school, it's huge now. And it's all people wanting to not have to do MCAS and teaching for their test, so to speak. So we'll see our public schools, not only do we have less kids, we'll see more and more go to private schools, so our public schools will have less and less students in their buildings.
Yeah, we have to adapt, right? We have to adapt to
And we're not.
provide the experiences that industry needs and wants.
Coming from someone who goes to Sweden on a regular basis to see my in-laws, to see my nieces and nephews, and see how that school system works, we're way behind. And I think doing something like this, teaching to the kid, not worrying about a test, because there is test anxiety. I saw like my daughter and several seniors last year, they're more stressed about the grades and trying to get into college and all this stuff because it's real money. I mean, you're talking real money that these kids, you know, they don't wanna be in debt when they get out of college, so it takes on a whole nother level of stress. And, you know, you're not a parent watching your kids and like sitting down like, you're gonna be okay, this, you'll get through this, and, you know, some kids don't have that, and I think moving the way, as Ronnie, obviously, we talk a lot about it, and she's very knowledgeable in this matter, and getting rid of that anxiety, that's, I mean, look at her, just adults themselves nowadays. See how many people are on anxiety medications. What do you think it correlates to our children? And I think getting rid of something like this, allowing them to learn, you know, even the staff in the school systems. I mean, I'm sure there's anxiety there too, because I don't want one of my kids to fail. So I'm judging myself on that, right? I just think it creates anxiety that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
There's no real benefit to it either.
The world is a very different place right now.
And Brian, the ability to put things like music in that place and maybe hire certain teachers coming forward that might be able to teach a boat building course or do something, if that's possible within a structured curriculum. You know,
Creativity is like.
We still have sewing machines and things like that. Triton, do we have anything?
Ma was
The
awesome.
room is still
I love
exactly like it was when
Where's the
she
seat?
left. Yeah.
So we don't have those
don't
type
have
of
that.
things that we,
Yes.
that might be something, if you're gonna go after music, go after some
Ma
of
was
those
the
things
best
that come
cook.
through
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of opportunities that.
And people might volunteer, I mean, I don't
Absolutely.
know if it's possible anymore, my wife used to volunteer, I know when I taught fourth grade, I had all kinds of volunteers in my classroom. I think things have changed.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, we still have volunteers.
Yeah, as long as you get quarried.
yeah,
I think it also goes to the practical. Triton was fortunate to have the high school come in with a recommendation to put personal finance in as a graduation requirement here. But that's one of the things, I mean, when I think about people complaining online about people, you know, young people not understanding how, you know, a car payment works, or taking out loans, you know, or signing a contract for your first apartment, or you know,
Signing
any
a
of the
check.
basics, signing a check, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, any of that, the basics
Life
of putting
skills.
together a personal budget, and that's not something that the MCAS required. So there's so many high schools that don't have it, and it's those practical skills that teach the
lot of those
day-to-day
kids don't
that
have
are
those
totally being blown by when you're looking at something like MCAS. It's teaching these skills that often aren't used, unfortunately, later in life, and missing the ones that kids really need to get by on the day-to-day, yeah.
and they're boring.
Well, that's,
What did you say?
they're boring.
Meaning MCAS.
Says a retired teacher.
Extremely.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions on that?
Deeply philosophical for a budget.
That was it on the budget?
That was the budget, yeah. Didn't sound very
Kinda digressed a
budgety.
little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the facilities.
Oh, wait a minute, I had a question with budget, sorry, about myself, and no, thank God I did that. Bus contracts, yeah, I know, bus contracts, when are those up?
It is up at the end of this year, so
So that
will be bid soon.
Cause that could really hurt the budget.
That could, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, there are districts that have seen 15%, 20%, 30% increase in rates. I will say I am hopeful, is that a right word, Brian? So I am hopeful that we have competition in the region, right? So Coach Company, so Coach Company has always been doing coach buses.
Right.
There was the current general manager, Jared left Salter and went to Coach. And they ventured into yellow school buses and won the Newburyport contract this year. the reports are, they're doing a great job. Communication is great, the drivers like working for them. They've largely been able to staff all the routes they need. We're still down 2 routes that we've budgeted for, and it's the 3rd year we budgeted and still can't fill them. Whether that be that it keeps prices in check or we end up with a new vendor, I'm not saying I'm hopeful, but there is potential to be hopeful for something. So we should know that I would say by the holidays. Is that a fair goal to say that by the time we head in to the winter break, that process, it's like a 30-day process-ish to post, and that'll all be happening over the next month and a half.
Can you, special ed buses for, out of district, can you go outside of whatever your main bus? Because I'm noticing more and more little companies pop up, like, I used to have the same buses, same 3 companies came into my parking
All the
lot.
time.
And now we have, I would say 10, 11 different companies, cause there's a lot of bus companies that are creating just the minivans, just to do special ed.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to get your licensing with the 7, the 15 passenger 7D vans. So we are not confined, we do have a contract with NRT, we have not bid that out. We've had a much better experience with the 7D vans through NRT. We've largely been able to get the drivers and vans when we need them. We have more of them than we wish we had, but we have used other companies as well.
The Triton kid I had came in on a different bus,
Yep.
not so,
Yeah.
I mean, I know you have used.
So I wanna say there's probably 6 different vendors we're using
Okay,
between, for students who we are cost sharing for homeless transportation or special education. Every once in a while, there'll be somewhere where, someone in a neighboring district has a van going from this area down to Landmark, and we can put a kiddo on the same van and cost share. The North Shore Consortium, if you're aware of that place, is actually the board we're working to try and figure out how to do a collective bid
okay.
for special ed transportation. That's a work in progress. I'm the one kind of like stepping back and watching it play out a little bit, because our rates are actually, our special ed transportation rates are actually, they've just raised it like $1 a year. Like, it's been very reasonable, because NRT obviously has the big yellow contract. So we'll see. The first step is, Brian's not gonna smile because this is the not fun part, but Brian's working on that. So once we have that bid, we can make a determination of whether we stay with and even stay with NRT or, but yeah, definitely there's a lot more players in that
Special
game.
ed out of
I don't
district,
know
yeah.
that there aren't any others that would be able to step up and provide, I don't know how many vans we currently have, 15, 17 vans like that. But there are certainly the onesie twosies that, I've got 3 vans, and those people are popping up all over the place.
Yeah, and that's great, cause that will keep down, cause I know that that's a lot of money on top of the tuitions that you pay,
Yeah.
that's a lot of money. And I don't think people ever realize that, my staff don't realize that too, when, they're like, why can't we hire more staff? And I have to put on my other half and say, well, this is a budget reason why, and it's not only the tuition that the school districts pay to have them come here, it's also the buses that they have, the vans, and that's
Yeah, I'd say the typical, when we're placing a student out, the base assumption is $100,000 now, right? So a tuition is rarely less than 60.
Yeah.
Some in the 50s, right? But I mean, it's
52.
yeah. So it's depending on the program.
But then you
more
throw 10,
specialized
15 for bus.
If it's a single bus, it's $40,000 a year. If we can put in share, if there's a bus already going from an area, our area down to a specific school, then it doesn't cost us any more because we're already paying for that van, or if we can cost share with another district. But
And then in some rare cases, some of these kids need a nurse on the vehicle.
Or a monitor.
Or a monitor.
With my students, God knows, almost all of them need a monitor, else they beat
What
each
is-
other up on the way.
What is the percentage of the budget that goes into transportation?
So we spend, rough figures, about, it's not quite 2 million on regular ed transportation, right? It's like upper 1 point something million, and it's around $1 million for special ed transportation. So call it, for round figures, about 3 million on 51. So that's roughly 6%? 6%?
So when you're talking to the bus companies,
Can you say, that's just transportation.
Just transportation, yeah.
when you're talking to the bus companies, are you trying to figure out with the geniuses at the State House where they wanted to change all these emissions of what it will end up doing to all the diesel vehicles that move children around, and now all these bus companies are gonna have to buy new buses, cause they don't meet emissions no more.
So that just got delayed a year.
It got delayed a year, but that's,
And I know they are, what do you call it, exempting like snow plows and others. I could see over the course of the next year, school buses being removed from that. There's lots of electrification grants, right? There's a lot of discussion around that and clean natural gas buses, which is all well and good, but when you don't have the charging infrastructure and you don't have the, natural gas infrastructure, it's a great intention. But, I mean, we couldn't electrify our fleet now without putting in a solar array. We literally, that would have to be, and park them out all, so, yeah, that will be, I have not spoken with
I have
those
talked to
geniuses.
Senator Tar and Don and asked, can you, those geniuses that are coming up with this short-sighted, putting the cart before the horse agenda, and not understanding the economic, what's it's gonna do to everybody. They all push back on it.
Yeah,
I wanna-
there's quite a bit of pushback. Yeah.
Please keep pushing back
Yeah,
on it,
for sure.
because, do you know how much a bus is?
Yeah,
They have to refit all those, what, it was 20 buses we have right now, yellow
19
buses?
on the road, yeah.
Yeah, you know how much
Fire
that's gonna
trucks.
cost? It's almost $500,000 a bus.
Yeah,
So,
We
guess,
tend, yeah.
guess who's paying for that? We are.
exactly.
So,
You know what's really funny? I don't know if I understand the concept, and I won't mention my propane company, but there've been propane-powered big trucks for a
Yep.
long time. You just informed me that they're going back to, regular gas trucks or diesel trucks.
Yeah, I think, again,
Something's up.
promising technology, right, I mean, there's
Well, the
continually
diesel, I mean,
trying.
you're starting to get tremendous mileage, they've changed the diesel motor, it's a lot better than it ever was, but something's up that we don't know about. Otherwise, if there was a tremendous diesel sanction coming our way, they wouldn't be going back they own the gas company.
Right.
Imagine all the hurricane victims trying to evacuate with all electric vehicles. AAA gonna bring you a gallon of electricity
Yeah.
when you're dead in the road and all the traffic.
in the winter, it doesn't work.
That
We're not
for a
there
gallon
yet.
of electricity, I like that.
So
Not there yet.
my sister-in-law over in Sweden,
No,
she had to
no
buy
idea
her,
there.
her mother-in-law's
Exactly.
electric vehicle in the middle of the winter last year, because her car was getting worked on. Now, she lives about 45 minutes away from Stockholm, where she has to go to work. She couldn't ride to work with the heat on. Now, this is Sweden in the middle of the winter. It's like -15, -20 on average. She had to ride with extra clothes on because the battery wouldn't last from her house to her work with the heat on, because the cold was drawing their battery's life out so much. I'm like, okay, well, we live in the Northeast. We don't go. How are we gonna go anywhere? It's not. They haven't figured it out yet. So that. I mean, people in Sweden, they went all electric probably 5 years ago. And a lot of them are going away because they just can't move around. It's too cold.
Yeah, so
No electric buses.
we have the ability to apply through a vendor, like if we award a contract, it's not cost effective yet, right? I think once we get to the point where we have an infrastructure, then let's talk about it.
And you're gonna always get the pushback of climate change. Well, the thing is, if we can't supply the needs, then it serves us. It doesn't serve us.
Eventually.
Eventually.
Okay.
That sounded more budgety at least.
I would just add at the end,
Oh.
get a long-term contract when it comes to the bus company, as long as you can get, because they're gonna have to make adjustments and we're gonna stick them to them.
Yeah, so we do a 5-year contract, we're allowed to do a 3-year plus 2 option years is what we've historically done.
There you go, make sure as low as possible, so
Right.
they can pay for it.
The facilities subcommittee.
It's me again, huh? All right, so this is just to keep you updated. There are other people around this table that have been part of these discussions, but wanted to make sure that you were aware and that if if you see plans coming back to the table and talks about designs, I wanted to make sure we're real clear on what this is and what stage we're at. So the facility subcommittee was formed this past spring. Obviously, Christine, are you officially now? Neil's kind of tapped you in.
Neil tapped me in, he
That,
just
yeah,
can't make it.
and Alicia or Tracy
Alicia,
from
yeah.
Newbury. have been the representative from the towns. We're meeting fairly routinely. We know we're waiting to hear from the state, from the MSBA, as to whether our project would be accepted late November, early December. It's crazy that that's next month. What the committee was charged with was determining an alternative path if we're not accepted by the MSBA. Secondarily to that, we've kind of taken the angle to say, well, maybe that plan B could end up being our plan A, even if we are accepted by the MSBA. We'll see. That's what we're still trying to determine. So the exercise was to look at possibilities at the current campus without a full partnership with the MSBA. Again, if we're accepted into the MSBA, we have no choice but to, by accepting, call it roughly 50% of the cost from them, we have to study every option, knock down, rebuild, renovation, gut redo, Pine Grove, like it looks the same, but it's totally brand new. We have to study all those options. It would cost us $1.5 million to $2 million to study everything. We then come forward with a plan that says this is the right 50-year solution. We're then bound by all their calculations, their formulas, which are driven by enrollment. We know enrollments are down, smaller enrollments yield smaller schools. So we were able to do a little creative solution in Rowley where we were certified for 63,000 square feet based on the enrollment, but by being creative, more of it became reimbursable, not all of it, so it's a full 91,000 square foot building. So those decisions all come into play when you're partnering with the MSBA. We said, okay, not thinking through all those options, if we were gonna just move forward, whether or not we heard yes or no from the MSBA, what do we need to do to make this, if we're gonna go to the taxpayers of Newbury, Raleigh, and Salisbury, it needs to be a 50-year solution. It cannot be a patch, it cannot be a fix. I don't want to poo-poo decisions made with the renovation in the late 90s to 2000, but there were a lot of decisions made that the problems exist today because they weren't really solved 25 years ago. So if we're gonna renovate anything, on my watch, it's gonna be a solution where we can say this is the right solution, we're really fixing everything. So obviously the first thing, if we're gonna just do a renovation, it has to solve all the problems, right? The HVAC, the building envelope, roof, windows, doors. It has to hit fit and finish, so it looks like it was built in the 21st century. But really, it's about all of those things. You remember the Habib report, it's referred to now, $62 million worth of repairs. That was repairing everything that exists today we're bringing it back to full form. There are a lot of things we wouldn't fix, and I keep using this as an example, that obelisk with the flagpole on top, it's like $86,000. Nope, just knock it down for a couple grand. So there's a lot of things in that that we wouldn't do, but there are a lot of things in that report that are now more expensive. So the base assumption is new windows, roofs, doors, right? And then all the HVAC, the mechanicals, the electrical, the plumbing, bringing that forward to new condition. Similar to Pine Grove, literally every pipe coming into that building, every wire coming into that building, every service, everything is brand new. The concrete and the steel and the brick is what existed. So the first thing we know, we have to check that box. We know it's at least 62 million, it's probably more than that. Secondarily, the discussion has been around what are the things that we need to fix on this campus that if we're gonna have a renovation, what do we have to make sure it also accomplishes? So the things that we prioritize are obviously those basics, bringing all of the mechanicals, the systems, building envelope. The second piece we talked a lot about was building security and efficiency. With a smaller school, we still maintain 2 separate office suites, 2 separate access and egress. And from a security standpoint, that's really challenging. We have a lot of students on a large square footage and a large footprint. So part of what we were looking to do is streamline the access. So what the plan I'll show you quickly does that. The other pieces were access control. And so within the building, all of the public spaces that are used, if you go at 8 o'clock on any given night, and I go in and I'll pull up all the security cameras, about 75 of them on that campus, and you look, there's people everywhere on that campus. They're on the fields, they're in the gym, there's a pizza party happening in the cafeteria, right? So all of those places that are used routinely, how can we make the building more secure and contain them? So that we can secure the building for those public uses and not open up the spaces that are educational spaces routinely for those type of events. So those were really the kind of the big takeaways. And then on top of that, it was what can we do to bring the educational space into what we were talking about earlier, right? Making sure that we have a facility that is able to prepare students with the technology, the structures, the learning spaces, that will be efficient and effective for 50 years to come. If you've seen any building designs, buildings are being designed much more, classroom spaces much more streamlined, so what I'm looking for, like component, modular,
Collaborative,
right?
yeah.
Collaborative, so they're much more open spaces, so they can be used for different things in the future as building, as enrollment, as needs change. So people who have been part of this, did I miss anything else as far as what we?
The only other thing is that we studied the current population and the size of the rooms, and out of that came that the middle school library media center is very undersized for what any recommendations are. Middle school, yeah. And the science labs are all about 2/3 of the size that they should be for labs to be run by student classes of our size.
Yeah, and then if we were to build with the MSBA, you have to, again, meet their minimum standards. The majority of our high school and middle school classrooms are in the 750 to 800 square foot range. Their standard is more like 850, so we would have to find a way, which is why the majority of projects that partner with the MSBA for reimbursable programs largely don't end up renovating because it becomes so cost prohibitive to make sure that all the spaces meet their minimum standards, that it becomes more cost effective. I won't name any other schools in the area, right? That just, it ends up being this exorbitant price tag when you look and think, my gosh, I could have renovated this for half of that. Yes, but then you don't get the money from the MSBA. So back to that discussion, it might still be that even if this was a bigger price tag, it makes more sense because we have less money to actually renovate existing spaces. So like we talked through, if you look at is it the first page? It says main level. Anything that isn't colored exists now, and we haven't talked about it. That doesn't mean it's not renovated, right? That doesn't mean it's not getting new mechanicals, new electrical, new fit and finish, ceilings, floors, right? All that stuff that's way needs new improvements. What we talked about was moving spaces around to achieve the efficiencies between the two buildings, the flow, and the security overall. So looking at that first picture for the main level, the right half is largely over a few levels where the majority of classrooms exist. You'll see that we really didn't talk about classrooms. They're in that 750 to 800 square feet, and any assumed design here, we'd be updating them, but no classrooms would necessarily change location. Does that mean one wouldn't be tweaked or what have you? Of course it might be. This exercise here, we're calling this a big block concept, right? This is not a schematic design, this is not a proposal. This is something that a design level that we could get to as a big block concept so that Habib and Associates can now go and cost this out at a high level. We might get a cost back in the middle of the next month, and we might be not even in the ballpark of conceivable, right? But this was the exercise first to say, to update everything and make some improvements, what would the rough price tag be? Rounded to 10, 20 million, not getting into itemized detail. So, in this proposal, or that's not a proposal, in this big block design, The big change here, there's some movement, like you see the yellow where it says 18 to 22 TLC or art in green. That's just rooms that are relocated, not necessarily from a design standpoint, there's nothing really there. The big key difference is the blue lobby, when then you see the pink high school admin and high school and middle school admin. That is currently right under the dotted line under the word lobby. That is currently the outside wall that you're looking at as you're walking into the high school courtyard. That's the gym on your left. This takes away there's two art rooms and then the nurse's office. That takes away those rooms, opens it up, and creates a big lobby. What this lobby does is, in conjunction with building a new space, which is the pink high school, middle school admin, it creates one location, the bottom left. It says security vestibule, pointing that little outcropping at the bottom of the lobby there. That is the access point for this school. So when someone comes in, they're buzzed in. Those are glass walls looking into the middle school or high school office, whatever it would end up being there. Someone can watch someone come in. If they're going to say we're going to go over to the central office, they walk across the lobby, and then you can see where it says district admin. District admin currently we've captured a middle school classroom, we've got an office across the hall, down the hall. This brings everything into the current district admin plus takes over the current high school admin space to put everyone in that one space. So you then also have the ability now, the whole middle school can come through the lobby to get over to the gymnasium. When you come into the lobby now, publicly thinking, you come in, you've got a big kind of staircase to your left that goes up to the gyms and up to the back of what is now the T's. Or right there, you're walking right into the auditorium. There's some bathrooms, that blue block on district admin. Where it says high school media, the high school media center, which is the library. That's the new term for a library. It is a double height, way oversized space. So in this design, it cuts it in half, moves the library upstairs, and then you gain space below that by basically putting a floor in there. Obviously, it's a design that's more complicated than that. So this brings the high school media library up to that second floor as well, which allows us to have events in the high school library, again, all right with a quick access off of the main lobby. If you see to the right of the lobby where it says new stairs, those go down, and if you, on the back side of that page, that takes you, where it says new stairs on the bottom left there, that takes you downstairs. Again, I should say the pink line is we'll call that the man trap area. So that's the area that we're able to secure a perimeter to make sure no one goes beyond that for certain public events. So that's all achieved through doors and hallways and such. So what used to be, that allows us to now come down the stairs, go down the hall over to the middle school, high school cafeteria. We did talk about there's probably enough space in here to put the cafeteria elsewhere and just lop the cafeteria off and the kitchen off and start fresh, like downstairs underneath the library or something. That gets very cost prohibitive. For efficient use of space, absolutely. That is more square footage than we need. Renovating a kitchen as it exists with plumbing and grease traps and all of that and an open space is far more cost effective than trying to rerun plumbing and all the mechanicals that are required for a kitchen. So that was something we discussed. Would love to get that cafeteria up towards the auditorium so that it's, again, all in one place. You've got the gymnasiums, the cafeteria, the library, and the auditorium all right there in one space. Just became too cost prohibitive without even having to cost, right? This all may be cost prohibitive, but without even having to look at numbers, we know that would be way too cost prohibitive to think through. So again, that stairway off of the main lobby brings you downstairs. There becomes a new multi-purpose assembly space. Again, thinking 21st century makerspace tech lab. We're bringing the broadcast studio that's currently in the outbuilding inside so that we have media labs and broadcast studio for our BTV programming. Within the building.
And no kids walking in and out during the school day.
Right, yeah. So, and then there's currently, in the outbuilding, we've talked about, there's currently a classroom on one end, history classroom, and then there's middle space, outdoor PE bathrooms that are in rough shape, and then the TV studio. This brings the TV studio in, and there's absolutely space to bring in that other classroom into this space, which we would then renovate that outbuilding as an outdoor athletics, another team room. Again, that's not expensive renovation. If you're talking about like we have for the stadium building, a concrete room with benches for a team to go into at halftime, bring those bathrooms up to the 21st century, and have those other outdoor PE classes. So that would be a low-key renovation, and that brings all of the regular classes. Again, security standpoint is hard when you've got 30 kids, 40 kids leaving to go to class out there. We have a door 17, which is the door kind of it's right at the end of that hallway on the right side of the cafeteria, where students go out. It's actually at on the other hallway, but it's on a timer so that it opens up between classes so kids can get back in, and then it locks again. But for that 3-4 minute passing period, those doors are wide open. So again, from a security standpoint, this gets everything within the main campus building. And then the third floor, there's really, the next page, it says upper level. This moves, we're talking about that new addition where the middle school and high school office would be upstairs from, you can see that on that final page where it says upper level. We would bring all of guidance and student support from the middle school and high school. Middle school and high school side by side to pool those resources and have those programs, since they do tend to do a lot of work together. So
Brian, also on the front page, the first page, the current middle school office suite would become the media library, middle school library media center.
Thank you, yes. Yes, so that's a big block thinking. Again, this is not a design, this is big block thinking. The current stage now is, I think it's November 15th. 14th, thank you. My brain back there. November 14th, Kevin Provencher and Julie O'Grady, his assistant, are coming back on November 14th. They're coming with a first kind of take at how they're costing this all out. Again, this is not paying professional costers to come in and cost out every aspect of this. The idea is making some high-level basic assumptions that we know the bidding cost for construction right now publicly in Massachusetts is around $1,000 a square foot, right? $1,000 a square foot, ridiculous. This is a 287,000 square foot facility. That's a $287 million project. We want to get far more detailed than that, but it is not going to be an exercise in, carpets are this much, and that, right? It's a flooring assumption for all of this, a window assumption for all of this. It's not true, they do have the count for windows, but for, ceilings and tiles and paint and stuff. So that's the next exercise. Again, just to keep reiterating, because we have plans floating around, we want to make sure it's clear that these are concepts. They're big block concepts, so that we can get a sense of, is there a path? If we hear yes from the MSBA in November, it's not an easy yes, because we know all the things we potentially have to study, and there is a likelihood that with an enrollment of, call it 900 students on the campus, 800 students on the campus, that we would be certified for a much smaller building. Right, Pentucket's is just right around 200,000 square feet, and they did some non-reimbursable space. So we'd probably be in the 180, 190,000 square feet. So there's potentially 100,000 square feet of, if we renovate, we're doing that without reimbursement. So it's all of those questions that the goal was to have high level but informative data to be able to say, okay, yes, this makes sense to partner with the MSBA, or no, we think we have a viable path to go forward on our own without any reimbursement. And if we were going without MSBA reimbursement or with, going after opportunities through or in National Grid customers, so the incentives and rebates through them, using renewables on the roof, and right, all those potential other incentives and rebates that could bring the costs of the project down. So.
What concerns me is, what if how do we know that everything is going to decrease, and how, people have families now, but they're
The
moving
census.
further away from downtown. So it could very well swing the other way, so if you're putting all this, in for a certain size based on what you think is going now, what happens if 25, 30 years from now, if you have a sudden, influx of a lot of people coming, I know families are coming back, and.
Absolutely, yeah, no, we had it at Pine Grove, right, from the time.
But they based it on the census, didn't they
So
pull their
they,
data from?
yeah, so MSBA certifies, and we agree it, but you basically give you the number and good luck trying to get another number. So we agree a number, and it's based on, we'll use a NESDEC enrollment, we did, Joel McKibben.
Oh, yeah, given.
McKibben?
Yeah.
Something?
Yep.
Something, yeah, McKibben, and he's actually out of North Carolina, but he's a great demographer and did a great report. So we would, use our reports and then they would use theirs and we would agree what the likely enrollment is. It's held fairly true at Pine Grove. There was a big up, right? It's not a dip, the opposite of a dip. There was a bit of a spike and it's now leveled off again. But it's a great point, Peter. I mean, the reality is you're making an assumption for eventually, right now, I was looking at some data today, the median age in the different age bands and the percentage those age bands have increased as a total of the population. It's a much older population, non-school age children population here in the kind of northeast Essex County, in that 25 to 40s is the slowest group. They've almost shrunk. And so, right with that, those are the likely childbearing, family age. So those are the families that aren't here now. But when those 60, 70, 80 somethings are no longer living in those homes, they are, right? There are gonna be families moving in, and yeah, we have to be ready. So again, that leads to the kind of challenging part of this is it could be costly, but it may be beneficial to go on our own and do a project if we can find a way to do it cost effectively, so that we can renovate everything and have all the square footage and renovate it in a way that allows us to keep it flexible and adaptable space. So that right at Pine Grove, the way we did those extended learning areas, awesome, amazing, but really expensive. And it's a cheap way to be able to make a classroom, but it's not that cheap. Versus having an open space that's currently this, but in, a blink of an eye, we roll out whatever furniture is there and put in rolling, desks, and all of a sudden we have a classroom and we can solve that problem.
Keeping in mind, if you go with the MSBA, construction actually wouldn't start probably for 3 years, and then what do you do with the current issues taking place in that building now?
Yep.
The
Great
leaks,
point.
the water, the this, the that,
Yes.
it's like the flip of the coin.
Yeah, the repairs, and we've been having those discussions with this group. I mean, the repairs, we did a tight tank that ended up being $40-ish thousand. Roof repairs, the water infiltration over the last year, $100,000 just in repairing. And some of that was insurance, but
Any municipal bids are gonna come in way
Yeah.
higher than the residential bid.
oh, absolutely, yeah.
It's
And
crazy.
talking to designers, it seems like they've leveled, right? Definitely have leveled. That doesn't mean they're shrinking, but I think they would become more reasonable. But yeah, I think it's gonna be a balance to determine.
As far
We
as
have a
the,
much more timely ability to respond if we're on our own.
as far as the bones for the draft that you put together for the improvements, do we have good bones? Or is the infrastructure on the building secure enough that it can sustain the
Next
the
World War,
renovation?
yes. So it is called it's a cast in place building. So that building
So
was
all of
literally
the-
poured.
Yeah, anything that, is weight sustaining or all that, is all in place and ready to go.
Yep. Yeah, we would probably have to.
'Cause that's
We're on
huge.
our own wastewater treatment plant, so my guess is, we would probably have to do some upgrades to that. I should say updates. I don't know that we would have to upgrade as far as capacity, because that's like a home. It's based on the number of bathrooms in your Title V.
Well, all load bearing and all that.
But all of that, yes, and it's, as we went through this, when you walk through the building next time, you notice that like it's all poured concrete and steel rebar columns, and then the floors are poured. So there's a lot of classrooms that they built a cinder block wall, or mostly cinder block, but those are not load bearing. The load is actually carried within the steel and concrete of the floor. So there is some possibility that if we went with the MSBA and they said, no, the standard is 850 square feet, not 795, and we needed to change classrooms, they would be at a potentially cost-effective way. We just don't know. Like, that's not the level of detail that they're getting into at this point. So
So that's already in place, pretty much.
that structure?
That part
Yeah.
of the structure,
Yep.
yeah.
It would be there if we didn't touch it in 495 years from now.
You can survive a nuclear blast in
That's
some of
right.
these areas.
They'll be like, doing the little brushes and digging this building out. Yeah.
When you go through next time, if you have that idea of the columns and then the load bearing floors, all of a sudden you'll see them, they like start
Yeah.
popping out at you and you're like, oh my gosh, that whole wall could come down. And it's not load bearing, so it would be totally fine. But I mean, even walking into the library, like it's really obvious when you know what you're looking
Yeah,
for.
yeah.
Yeah, well, the library was supposed to be a pool.
Yep.
Oh, that's
You
right.
can, you can actually look at it when you go in and go, oh
Which,
yeah, that's why.
To make, like, we're not proposing a pool.
Yes.
If any of you would like us to propose it, I'm just kidding. Right, there's no.
What could it be rented out for? I mean, this is.
Yeah, right, and so there's been no dreaming with this, right, for lack of a better term. If we put a group of educators and principals and said, okay, what do we really need? That's not this exercise. That's not true. What we need, this is the exercise. What would we like, right? If we're really talking about preparing students for, what life is like in the world and the jobs outside our walls, I think we can achieve some of that. This is not the ideal, but this is likely a very effective alternative. The question is it an affordable alternative? So that's the question to be answered. So, if regardless of the path we choose, if we are accepted with the MSBA, or accepted into and accept and partner, the next step is studying, right? So that feasibility design, that phase is as quick as we want it to be. We can quickly get into feasibility. It's a year to 2 years of studying, right? And we accelerated with Pine Grove and it was a year.
And it's
So-
a smaller campus too.
So you have to expect that it's at least a year, if not a year and a half. The money that we have in stabilization, that 1.6-ish, would likely be, or would be, spent on feasibility on the study, not on any designs. If we don't partner with the MSBA, we have that money in stabilization, and we could go right forward, bid out, get an OPM, and get a designer, and start designing with that money. So there is savings there, if you will, more efficiencies of the ways we're using that money. But then everything from there forward is there's no other offset from the MSBA on that. So.
And one of the problems, Brian, will be like speaking to what I see in Newbury with, let's say, Plum Island and the change of demographic in Old Town. You're certainly gonna have a tremendous push to build the smallest school that makes sense by the voters.
Yep, for sure. Yep, for sure. Yeah, and I think, right, just the bare minimum has to be bringing this building into the 21st century, right? So not putting a lobby on that improves efficiency and security or moving admin suites. In that right out of the gate might be prohibitive. But that's what we have to.
Especially if the, if the state says make a smaller building. So it's kind of,
Yeah, and I can't imagine that there's another spot that would work. When you talk about the location, then the question would be, does that campus have the ability, right? I mean, if it was a smaller footprint, 3 or 4 story, smaller footprint building, I suppose it could fit out on the fields, and then you reverse and have, I just can't
Aren't the fields
see
full of
them.
water?
Right, it's all wetlands.
It's all wet.
Inner fields are okay. Not touching the stadium, I can tell you that. Yeah, so just to be clear, right, so regardless of what path we choose, MSBA or not, we would go through an extensive design phase, right? This is not a design phase, this is not the community feedback and input and proposing, schematics and plans and getting feedback and that's all the design phase that is, a year in the making. This is an exercise in getting, deciding whether a concept non-MSBA partnership is even a possibility, so.
I would just add to Jeff on that, I understand where Jeff's coming from and some of the people in Newbury, but we made that mistake 25 years ago, Jeff.
And people in Newbury keep making it again and again. We're good like that.
Realistically, it's just the way it is.
I know, but I mean, here we are 25 years
It's
later.
gonna be up to us to change minds.
I know, yeah, well, we, as Brian says, we want it to go 50 years. I mean, we can only, we have to advocate in the best interest of all of us, right? And the best interest for all of us is a 50-year school, not a 25-year
But
school.
it's just, you've got less students in yours now than you've ever had, so it's hard.
Yeah.
I just don't think we should start with that mindset.
But it
Because,
will-
if we had a $12 million, you know this, if we had a $12 million public safety center, we'd be in a much better position right now than we were. The people of Newbury always want smaller, and it always screws them over in the end.
Well,
So if we start by catering to them, we lose before we even have a beginning discussion.
How do you reconcile the fact that that was the most intelligent thing to do, and you're calling it small by scale, and everyone thought it was huge? So you be the seer, because
Yeah, I'm just saying, we need to start with the
Long time,
right
it's
thing
hard.
and educate people, not
we have a
not
police,
cater to people who don't
we have a
understand.
police station and a new floor in the fire station. We could have come close to building a new complete town hall and
Off
safety
subject.
center,
So going back, some of the, I would add on there, I personally, I know, some of the selectmen were looking too was mental health. I talked to Ronnie about that with a lobby, gaining mental health, administration moving in the right areas, you're gaining mental health. Roof lines were addressing, health issues with the mold and everything else is being addressed. The ADA, the elevators are getting fixed, so there was a lot of focus on all that. So it was just, I would say there was more than just security that we were looking at.
Yep.
So, I mean, that right there, the four big, I call them, how can people say no to that? At the end of the day, how can you say no to that?
Well, there'll still be some, but hopefully we have more.
Yes, more that, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone is going into this under false pretenses that this will be not be an incredible challenge, right? So I think that's where the focus has been, let's do it right and communicate early, communicate often. And as we're making decisions, float it, test it, see if there's support so that when we come back and say, remember we had this discussion, we had to have this in there because, and yes, it's costly, but, so I think it's gonna be a lot of time and energy in communicating, but,
This is a completely different vibe than it is with the other school
other-
that's looking for a new building. Because there were no communications, there's been no transparency.
Yep.
And that's what has people
Mhm.
angry about it
Mhm.
and not interested.
Yep.
Well, we have to keep in mind, we're saying that in this small little room, that'll be the big part is making sure, because we will still have people go, we didn't know about
Of
this.
course.
So
Of
that's why
course.
we will have to do a
Mhm.
good job with making
Mhm.
sure that we're communicating out, because we tend to live in our silos too, we all do. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I look at Facebook and go, how did you not know that? Like seriously, it was in the newspaper, it was this, it was that. And people will still go, we didn't know about this, so I think we really
We're
need
still
to.
getting that over the 3A.
Right.
Talking about it for how long?
Yeah.
Yeah, we gotta
So I
get
think
people
we
out of
have
the
to-
bubble
Yeah.
that they live in.
Yeah.
We gotta make sure we pop the bubble and say, hey, we need this. And something else Brian brought up too is,
They like their bubble.
well, exactly, well, the bubble was comfortable, right? You know, some people will swallow
let's be
too
real,
much.
we all love our bubbles, just saying.
Some people will swallow too much, I was never swallowed growing up in the military. But we also talked about too, Brian, the doorways, the windows. Some people like, there was nothing wrong with that door, but we have to get across, this has to last another 50 years.
Right.
We're not looking for another 5 years down the road for that door. We're looking for another 15 years down the road for that door. So that's something else that we thought that we're gonna have to get across to people.
I don't think there are many doors that people would look at and say, let's keep that one, but there are a lot of windows, like
Yes.
especially in the middle school add-on
Yeah.
that are now 24 years old, and you look and you think, yeah, we could keep those.
Yeah.
But in 20 years, we're gonna be regretting that decision, so,
And a
yeah.
lot of people who might be the naysayers haven't necessarily stepped foot onto that campus in
Right.
15, 20 years if they have kids that are, but
That's true too.
the staff and the students that live in that building every single day, and I was one of them for 20-something years, you have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, and I think it'll take a lot of creative outreach, me having coffee when we have something to show, right? Whether it's an MSBA partnership or on our own, going for coffee at the Council on Aging every Wednesday and hanging out and answering questions, and right, I mean, it's that kind
Yeah.
of
One of the
thing
things
to
that,
outreach and.
Raleigh has a recent rebuild, West Newbury, timing is everything. A lot of other places, it's of the same same age. So, I mean, it makes sense, the
Yep.
timing's right.
Yeah, I mean, we literally, no one will ever be as lucky as Pentucket was on the timing of having literally bidding that as COVID was unfolding. And every designer has said, they paid, it was like 146 roughly million, and that project is easily another 100 to if not double. Easily 250, probably more like 3, for what they did. And that was only 5 years ago.
Did they scale down too? Did they scale down,
No,
or
they
they
just
kept it
did
what it was?
So it was a little different because they were combining a middle school and a high school that were separate facilities into a shared, like we already have. But they ended up doing, they now have all turf fields that they didn't plan on, and
That no kid
brand
wants to
new.
play on.
That what?
No kids wanna play on.
I know, yeah. I guess it looks nice. I don't think the people that live right next to it like the lights, but, so we will very unlikely be that lucky.
I just can't see really scaling down that, you scale down a little bit, but I don't, if you're really gonna box yourself in and then find out like 25 years later that the population has increased by 20% in Raleigh, it's possible, then what's gonna happen? You're gonna have to build another add-on.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely an argument, even if the cost, even if we're looking at what could potentially be a new construction cost, and, say it's roughly half of that, it might make sense if we know we're only gonna get so much back from the state and it's the same amount we would pay to do this. But even if it's a little more, it's an argument to say, no, it's better for us to go this alone because we can renovate every corner of this building in a creative and effective way, leaving open spaces that can be just reconfigured with furniture so that it can be used for, if we have another 300 kids in the future, great. I wanna give you, that was very close. I think he's actually shocked.
I'm shocked.
Nice.
I saw it coming on the other side of you. That's pretty scary.
I also think, obviously we have a lot of kids who are in private schools too. We gotta engage those parents, cause as we know, they have little care about the high school. So,
Rather than they would come in.
Yeah, I
this
was
is
just
more
gonna, I was just
attractive.
thinking that.
That's what I'm saying.
You know what, yeah.
PR and communication.
Am I gonna pay
Yeah.
$20,000 a year to go if
Yeah.
if Triton looks just as good and
Yeah,
had,
yeah. And that way, we can also say by renovating the high school and making it, not only staff friendly, our kids friendly, now staff friendly. Like I talked about indoor vegetations and calming, rooms, like where the smoking rooms used to be, they're outside, that's in put it in glass and make really cool science rooms with hydroponics and, making it better and.
We did talk about smoking rooms too.
Well, that's what, the courtyards, when my mother went there. Yeah,
Exactly.
well, my mother used to go there, that's where they used to go smoke, but.
oh yeah, no, that was when I was up
It was
there.
a smoking lounge.
Yeah, the smoking lounge.
We're walking by the teacher's
You-
lounge
If
and
you
just
played
like the
sports, you were
smoke
not
coming out.
allowed out there, you were gonna get kicked
So
out.
if we do cool things like that, you're gonna get a lot of those private school parents saying, well, maybe I don't have to pay $20,000 a year.
Yeah. I mean, there are many reasons why students and families take students to private schools, right? I'm not naive to that. But there are a lot of conversations I have had that if the building was different, the families would not be going.
Exactly.
Right? It was not my family's always been an Austin prep family, or, right, I don't want my kid going there.
And then
I've seen
you're gonna attract better, as we have really good faculty now, but you might attract more energetic faculty, a better science teacher, cause look at this. Aquarium I'm basically teaching in, I wanna teach here, so I think that's where we need to go and focus with those people.
School choice as well.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I had this family that when I worked with, they were living in Reading and they had this big house and pool and everything, and she downsized to half the size to move to Newton and get, top education and everything, So
Yeah, I mean,
maybe,
A lot of families who make the choice.
People move to Lexington, cause
Yeah.
then they don't have to pay for private school. You pay crazy money per house, but.
that's the direction we should go in.
Okay, got it, duly noted. So bottom line here is, it is a work in progress, we're looking at high level decisions about how to move forward. We are nowhere near a design. But
At least we're talking
I
about.
tried though, I was trying to get in there.
I would say, we're nowhere near an actual design, but we've got a lot of good conversation and a lot of important decisions and discussion happening. Yeah, so when I say design, meaning something that we're moving forward,
Yeah,
saying,
it's not,
Yeah.
the ink
it's not a
isn't
plan
dry.
yet, it's a concept.
It's a,
But good conversations happen.
Brian had to keep pulling me in, cause the architect in me and the
It's like talking about trees, the architect's like, I need to know where the wall's gonna go.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions on facilities subcommittee? We're gonna move on to the alternative assessment update. And I don't know if the towns have spoken with, I know that Salisbury's,
So Rowley, we reached out to our members of the FinCom. I know Peter, you weighed in. Dennis Roy from the FinCom weighed in. Our financial team, which was Deb Egan, our town accountant, town treasurer, and our town assessor, and the Board of Selectmen, and where and now. For various different reasons.
Can I just ask a question based on an email I received? Do you think the question was clear? On what you were asking them to weigh in on?
I mean, yeah, I thought so, yeah, I mean.
Okay.
Sorry, what does the no mean?
That we're not, Rowley is not interested in continuing pursuing an alternative assessment. We'd rather.
Yeah, so just to clarify, that was the question
Yeah.
at the last meeting, a couple meetings ago, was each town officially from that May meeting where we kind of collectively met and talked about, we've been doing this
10 years.
for a long time and tried
Newbury
many
isn't
different
either.
iterations. Is there interest in continuing to pursue?
Said about Newbury.
but Newbury isn't interested in,
Continue,
we're just gonna, leave it status quo.
stick to the statutory method.
And we did the same thing, finance committee, everyone was there and
Yeah.
so no.
Can I ask a question then? What are we going to do to avoid situations like we've been having? Because when we were just about done with the budget last year, we got letters at the 11th hour about what we can't afford. We keep doing the same thing round and round. If we're gonna take things off the table, we need to be exploring better revenue options.
We were talking last year and starting to project the budgets at least at our levels earlier. We'll be able to kind of come together with some forethought instead of waiting till the very end like Tracy does because information's not there.
Who doing the budget earlier? The school?
All of us, just no
Oh.
us,
Oh.
the town's becoming really.
Cause I was gonna say, that's the
I'm
problem.
not talking so much about timing, I'm just, we've cut to the marrow. We were on a spending freeze most of last year. There's nothing else to cut. And I'm very concerned that if we're gonna say, okay, well, we're not gonna move forward with any new configurations, that's fine. But when it's one town's turn or another town's turn, Newbury in particular, we're at almost a 50-year low on our tax rate. If this isn't the time to explore a possibility, it's never coming. So
We're on a 50-year low as far as our tax rate, but our assessment is way up.
so is our income per capita.
Yeah.
There's maybe 10 towns in the state with a bigger gap than us between income per capita and low tax rate. And we're hanging in some rarefied air that we can't belong in. So we've got a moment where we could be doing that. And if we're not gonna do that, what are we gonna do? Cause we're valuing low taxes over students. We
I'm
can
just
dress
gonna
that up
say,
any way you
you know,
want to, but.
Via discussion through the select board, I'll just say that we can't give you a projection on what the budget's going to
I'm
be
not asking for a
because
budget
everything-
projection, I'm asking what are we doing to be creative?
Yeah,
This was a creative possibility, okay, it's a no. What else is out there?
Well, if you watch the Newbury Select Board meeting, which I do because Mike sends them to me. And I watched it, I have to watch it, Mike and I are probably the only ones who watch it. But when they had their combo finance committee, the finance committee actually brought up a couple good options, at least to start discussing in Newbury. Again, I'm not speaking for Newbury, it's just what I watched. Salisbury, I mean, we're another, but about when it's kind of years, you know, like last year, Salisbury, for the first time in 15 years, we actually didn't have the increase that we normally have. So are there moments like that that you can put aside money so that for the next year when you go up, like Raleigh Raleigh spiked up. I said to Raleigh 3, 4, 5 years ago, hey, Clark kids are coming back and you're gonna get screwed, and guess what? They got screwed. So there may be moments when, like that year that Raleigh, when all those kids went to Clark, the 21 year,
Yeah, it was
COVID year, that they could have put aside money so that then they didn't scream and
That's a
shout
great
last
idea,
year.
I did see at least one town looking through things that had a
That was what you
regional
guys talked about, right?
stabilization fund,
Yeah.
a regional school stabilization fund.
Right.
But, I mean, it just, if we're not gonna pursue this, then we're going into it eyes wide open and saying, we know that this cycle happens. And
Yeah. So I do think, I agree, I think there needs to be some discussion, if there isn't an alternative assessment, and I respect and understand the same way I respect and understand the Haverhill Regional Agreement, because I've been on the Whittier Regional Agreement. I respect and understand why Haverhill goes, no way are we changing this regional agreement because we will get hurt. I also, because Salisbury would benefit, being the town that would benefit the most, I understand why Raleigh and Newbury said no to that, but I agree that Raleigh and Newbury then probably have to look at, are there other options that they can do as finance committee and select boards so that they don't run into it? Like, is there a stabilization? The year that we're low, we put $300,000 into a pot or whatever it may be. So I think that is something worth
I
continuing
would
to look
add
for.
that Salisbury wouldn't have benefited for the next 3 years.
With what? Yeah, no, you're right.
With
No,
this
no, no.
alternative assessment.
Oh,
Newbury,
without a
Raleigh,
doubt, without a doubt. And next year, we probably
We
won't.
would have paid a lot more.
Our kids, if you look at the
next
we're
2 to
gonna
3
be happy
years,
for the
Raleigh,
next
I
couple
don't
years,
think,
so.
I don't know if Newbury and Raleigh realized that.
I
To be
agree.
honest with you, I watch all you guys meet, I don't think you guys realize that you guys would benefit tremendously the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. I mean, the next couple of years, I'm like, okay, don't change
I'm
the
okay with that, I'll
assessment,
chill,
because we're gonna be
our
happy for the
assessment,
next
our
couple of
children
years.
enrollment's going
Yeah,
down, we'll
yeah.
be paying less and you guys will be paying more. That's, I have no problem with that.
But I do think that conversations need to happen, but I think it needs to happen in individual towns.
Yeah, and the challenge becomes, we can do all of the pre-planning, right? We could give you a 5-year projection, a 10-year projection. We could give you a projection in January 15th about our numbers, and they look great. But then if Newbury increased disproportionately and Raleigh went backwards or Salisbury went backwards, you could, right, it could be a $1.5 million total increase. And Newbury could eat 1.1 of that just by the nature of the numbers, which is the attraction of a alternative assessment, but it's also the reason why it's so hard to sell, right? Is because it requires, not the people in this room, I think the people in this room, we've been talking about it forever, get it, but it's getting constituents to understand that the long game matters, and it would be beneficial to everyone eventually.
it's just putting that money mark in front of,
Yeah.
just starting the conversation with that. The ears go off, they're not gonna listen anymore, so, money talks loud, and it also, money will deafen you at the same time.
But I think it should kick in, like an insurance policy, it shouldn't, be, back and forth, swapping, only at a certain level where if one town's increase is more than the increase of the other 2 towns combined, something like that, I think that's, we don't
So that was,
wanna be having it.
so that is an like, what,
That
not a
was the
circuit breaker,
alternate.
would you call it?
Continue the
Like-
discussion
like
about
pressure valve.
assessor looking at other
Right,
things.
that's what we were trying to come up with, like a pressure release, that if that happened.
But it sets a new standard, right? So if, say, Rowley got $200,000 out of a stabilization fund, they're gonna have to make that up next year as a new starting point, right? So if it worked out and Newbury got a little bit of money, that stabilization is gonna have to pay that money every year going forward, or they're gonna have to make it up eventually. So that was where we kind of landed as okay, if not a true alt assessment, maybe a pressure valve, like some kind of circuit breaker. And it just, there's ways, but it always, like, you have to catch up, like, there's no way to hold someone harmless forever.
But
Yeah.
it doesn't have to, if it's, if it's a rare situation that, like we were almost in that situation, but we weren't Raleigh, if the scales really tipped and Raleigh paid more than the other two towns, then, I mean, that doesn't, if you go back probably over 40 years, I wonder how many times that would happen like that,
Well, we
where there would
did
be
go back
that,
15 years and,
yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah,
did
it's
have
rare,
problems.
that year with Rowley was one of the most unique years to have over 50% of the total assessment going to one town. It's been way skewed, but it's been a handful, very
But
unique.
see, that's the thing, if it's only used for like a real dire emergency where one town is really getting whacked much greater than the other two towns together, that's, if you use it for like that purpose, I mean, I don't know.
I think the issue is that it has to get voted every year, right? It
Yeah,
it
three
it
times.
All
becomes,
three towns.
yeah, it becomes part of your budget vote every year. So let's say that a pressure release valve kicks in because, let's say it's Rowley and Newbury that are getting hit, right? And they collectively get 500,000 sort of set aside, right, for that year. Let's say they get hit again the next year. Now you're making up that 500,000 plus.
The odds of getting hit again twice in a row?
Well, Salisbury had it quite a few years.
You had it like, didn't you have it like 5 years in a row?
I mean, it was, when Erica pulled up the data, it was kind of crazy. I think there was so many years, we would have totally paid, I can't remember how many millions dollars less. Like, there was one year it was $500,000 less we would have had to pay, and it was consistent for many years. So, I mean, it was Salisbury, the last couple of years, we're happy, but it wasn't that way for many years.
Because it tends to be a trend, right? So it's where one town is increasing, particularly in enrollment, but often as they're increasing in enrollment, they're also increasing in their tax
Aggregate
valuation and their per capita income at the same time. So they're getting hit in triplicate essentially when you look at the state formula. And the other two towns are sort of not, either they're not growing at the same rate or they're stepping back. And like for Salisbury, that was, I believe, 4 years in a row that was happening, whereas Rowley and Newbury were stepping backwards. So if Rowley and Newbury had sort of taken the pressure off of Salisbury in year one, now you've got both the amount that they, sort of took the pressure off, plus whatever the increase was the next year, and then the next year it would have gotten even more calamitous because it would have been the pressure releases from the 2 previous years plus whatever the new increase was, because it does tend to, there are times where it's wildly up and down, but there are also times when it trends, and when it trends you don't know in the year that you would be applying it first what's going to happen in the next year, because you don't know at that point whether it is one of those wild swings or whether it is a trend. You end up in a real rough recovery when you model it out if it is a trend. Like, it makes it worse rather than
And that's when the
helping.
people, they would vote against and say, no, we won't do it this time. I don't know, maybe that's
Yeah.
not so great if they're cherry picking whatever they want. But
Right,
I'm
that's
just
what
saying,
that's what my fear would be, that you would get, the year that your town benefits for it, you're all for it, and then the
Right,
year
and,
your
you know,
town doesn't.
There has to be a commitment to, long range.
And a trust.
And a trust.
I mean, next budget season, we kinda know, cause the enrollment's going way up in Newbury, right? They had a big,
60 students at Pine
Kindergarten.
Grove? I mean, not Pine Grove, but
60 at Newbury
at the
compared to,
elementary, yeah.
more like 40 at the other two elementaries. But again, look at what students graduated, and sometimes that nets off,
Yeah.
right? You have a larger Newbury graduate.
Enrollment at the elementary was considerably up this year than it has been in the past few years.
But there's
Kindergarten
also-
specifically,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's also so many other contributing factors, so the double whammy, the perfect storm, horror storm last year for Raleigh was that big, huge, housing complex that went in, that all the
Healthy
houses were
Rich.
1 point something million. You had that plus a year that your students went up. So
We
it's
also
hard to
have
predict.
2 bargaining units this year. We're
And
in
also the-
negotiations with police and fire.
But doesn't enrollment really factor in
No free.
to how the town is, how each town is going to come in at the bottom line every year, like Newbury came in bad last year, but now we have an uptick on enrollment. Is that going to put us in a better light, or is it gonna,
It's gonna raise your,
It's gonna raise you, just like what happened to us in Raleigh.
yeah?
Yeah, but again, things can change.
We only had 15 kids.
Yeah, so it's, the big change was kindergarten that I've shared with in the past, but it's what changed all across the way, so 5th grade going into middle school, we keep 6th grade, if they're gonna go to the private schools, they tend to go in 6th grade, because that's when this, the prep starts, so there's all different factors, but yes, if a town is increasing overall enrollment, they're taking a larger piece of the pie. And then it's a game of percentages, right? So it's your number, but it's also your number compared to Raleigh's and Salisbury's. And
May have lost students.
who may have lost students, right? For sure.
Which also hurt Raleigh last year, we lost students.
Yeah. But then the state might come in and say, you're really rich, and so crank up your minimum local contribution.
that's definitely happening in Raleigh
Right.
and Newbury right now, cause you look at the houses that are moving in, poor people don't buy them,
Yeah,
so.
so it's definitely, it's not.
We're a rich community, and let me just write a check out for everybody.
Yeah, so,
And which may swing too, because we're hoping it doesn't happen in Salisbury with all the beach erosion going on. We hope we keep our home values. But if those home values start dipping, Salisbury will be paying less even more. Cause then your guys' median income will be going higher than us.
it's delayed a year or two, depending on the
Yep.
property value.
We don't see a decrease in property values, but we're hoping we don't. We hope we can cure their erosion issue. Cause that's all
We'll
only.
see a big change after this election.
That's only, I mean, we have other streets that are very, nice homes, but our real wealth is at our beach, so we're hoping we don't see a change in.
Newbury's got Plum Island, right?
But to Paul's point, I think if we take this off the table, I don't think you should take it off the table in your individual FinComs and your select board, because you gotta come up with some other kind of plan, or else, to your point, you're writing letters going, poor us, we can't afford it, and the reality is, you should have planned. That's what we'll say, right? So I think you should all continue to have your discussions in your individual finance committee and select boards. I mean, Erica even came up with I heard her say something about like every so many years you have an override just because that starts it over again to increase tax, and do you
That's
do
what
that?
Newburyport does. I talked to Sean Reardon about how does he fund it, and I think a 10-year
Definitely
rolling
have-
average, that every 10 years they do a override.
Yeah, the rolling average isn't a popular structure here in Newbury. So, we'll see.
I just hope we don't continue to have the same fights every single year about that.
I don't wanna fight with it.
Does anybody else have any other thoughts or?
Can I say one thing I was gonna say, just to clarify, when we're talking about fiscal 26 budget, for fiscal 25, last month I shared with you that I was gonna be proposing that the extra chapter 70 be added in the adjusted budget, the fall adjusted budget, and then it's moved to stabilization. That went to finance subcommittee today, and the finance subcommittee agreed, so that'll be recommended at the next month. So just to clarify that process is moving forward. So in essence, we're getting 159,000 and change more in chapter 70 that we budgeted. We'll increase the spending by that much, we'll increase the revenue by that much, because it's new revenue that wasn't budgeted for. That gets added to the line in the budget that is funding stabilization, and that will move back to stabilization. So we ended up using 240
250.
250, we ended up using 258 out of stabilization to close fiscal '24 because of all those repairs at the middle school, high school we were talking about. So this, in essence, puts back 2/3 of it. So, just to clarify that, what I had said was a Brian thing last month is officially a finance subcommittee a recommendation as of today, and the committee will take that up on November 13th, 14th.
The next meeting's 11/14 in Salisbury. I wanna thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
This is always a great way to have open, honest, and transparent information flowing. So thank you and have a nice evening.
Linda, you didn't say your